we'll kick off with some quick intros, and then we'll dive into the actual meat and potatoes here. Obviously, we've got what I would define as being a banger of a lineup today, with three great coaches here to share some knowledge with us. So just going into some quick intros. For those of you guys who don't know any of these gentlemen, we've got Les Spellman on the call today, founder of Universal Speed Rating and Spellman Performance. So my fearless leader over here with the Universal Speed Rating and the Speed Lab partnership, and kind of the visionary here on our side. Obviously, we've got Tony Holler on the call. Probably needs no introduction. Obviously, a huge asset to our community and what we're doing. Feed the Cats, head coach at TNF, Plainsfield North High School. And we've got a new guest today with Joey G. So Joey, welcome to the team here. We're excited to have you. For those of you guys that aren't familiar with Joey G, he's the head strength and conditioning coach at FAU. Joey, I think you also have a background with, correct me if I'm wrong here, but Ole Miss and a couple other schools, correct?
Yeah, LSU, Colorado State, and Western State.
Yeah, 100%. Do you want to give just like maybe a super quick background and bio on yourself, a little more detail, since this is your first?
No, everybody knows Joey G at this point.
Man.
If you don't know Joey G, you shouldn't even be here. We're not gonna do that, bro.
All right, fair enough.
He's the man. We know Joey G.
Give me
so
two
if you
more.
don't know,
You don't ask LeBron what sport he plays. So, like
don't show his intro. Fair enough. Okay, cool, guys. Well, then we will dive straight into it here. So today's topic, and I'll unshare my screen in a minute so that you guys can see the attendees here a little bit better, or the panelists a little bit better. But today, just to set the agenda, we're going to be diving into using drills in your training and in your speed training specifically. And that's a broad topic, but we always like these conversations to kind of, for the attendees, be like almost like you're getting to be a fly on the wall in like how these three coaches, Joey, Les, and Tony, are having conversations with each other, the stuff that they're thinking about, what they're bouncing off of each other, so on and so forth. So start dropping your questions in the chat here, and I'll kind of guide the conversation around those questions. But just to get the conversation going with like some low-hanging fruit here, we'll kick off and say, Tony, do you want to list a couple of like the top drills that you're utilizing with your players throughout the year? Like, what are the most consistent go-to things that you're using, and why is that?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, because there are speed coaches out there that say that drills do nothing, that what we get accustomed to no longer changes us. And there's no doubt, I looked up drills today online, and it said a systemic repetition, where we try to teach and perfect a skill. So the thing that I use speed drills for is to teach the difference between sprinting and running. It's mainly front side mechanics and being able to bounce off the ground. Ground contact times are really important. So we repeat those things over and over and over again, just like we would repeat things in the first and second grade to hardwire certain skills. And I realize that there's always the question of what do we repeat and what do we introduce? And I think both things are really important. My introductory things are all what I call X factor, but we're very repetitious in our speed training. And I always go back to the great John Wooden quote, the 8 laws of learning: explanation, demonstration, imitation, repetition, 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 repetition. And when I think back to my days as a basketball coach, man, there's some things in basketball where you better repeat them or you won't be very good at them, namely shooting. Well, for us, sprinting is something that we must be repetitive with. And if I did not do a set of speed drills at the start of every practice, I just wonder when I would coach. You can't coach a guy running full speed. So that's kind of the way I see drills. But in particular, we're really trying to get front side and hitting the ground hard.
Yeah, I love it. And I can always rely on you to kick us off by taking what seems like maybe a really broad topic and starting us to get us granular with it, because you talked about repetition versus introduction, which already like piques my interest on like, well, how are you thinking about when to introduce different drills into the training, and how are you identifying that? But maybe that's something we'll get into. Les, anything that you wanted to add there? Because I see you over there already taking notes.
I just like the way sometimes like you hear something a lot, but then you admire the way someone says it, which changes your perspective on the same thing. So like obviously I've heard Tony speak and heard talk about drills, but then you hear somebody say something that's like the way he said that resonates, and then I can repeat that. Um, but yeah, so I think it comes down to what's your purpose. Excuse me. So like what's the purpose of speed drills? Like we're trying to do something to make the athlete faster. Is it the primary thing is a question? And I think all of us would agree it's not the primary thing. It may not even be the secondary thing. It's probably tertiary. It's probably a couple degrees away from actual purpose, which is trying to make someone faster. Um, but making someone faster is complex. There's a bunch of components to it. So obviously, you have the technical component, which is kind of what everyone focuses on. Everyone looks at shapes. They look at the interaction between those shapes. They look at the coordination between those shapes. And that's kind of what people talk about on social media, like toe dragging or arm swinging or those types of things. And then you zoom out a little bit and you have like more like an acceleration pattern of someone going from a start to high speed and what that might look like and how that might, how someone might do that. And you just keep zooming out and you realize like drills play a role in this, like, but it's not the only role. And it's a really good starting point when you get introduced to speed because that's the thing that you can see. It's the pieces that are underlying that are harder to see. Like how powerful is the athlete? How strong is the athlete? Do they have the structural or physical capabilities to run fast? Um, those are a little bit more complex and a little bit like more under the surface. That if someone walks up to you and they start running, like you don't know all those things. You have to kind of ask or probe or test to figure that out. So yeah, I think drills are important. I don't think they're everything. I think I mean, our era right now is show some really complex, sexy looking things, gain followers, and then, you basically are trying to lead people in that direction. I think that's the difficult part of this conversation, but yeah.
Yeah, a lot there. Thanks, Les. Joey, where's your head at? How are you thinking about this?
Yeah, I think you got to define what a drill is when it pertains to speed, right? So anything that isn't running at maximal speed is a drill. Okay, so sleds are drills, some maximal sprints are drills, like all these things are drills. And my thing is always this too is drills are teaching tools, they're context, they're warm up. There's a lot of different meanings for drills. There's a lot of reasons to indulge and get into drills, right? They're there to address specific deficiencies or pattern dysfunctions and all these things. That's why they're there for. They're to correct things, right? They're constraints that allow behavioral changes and movement changes that are going to benefit the whole, right? Them moving from point A to point B much more efficient, much more powerful. And I do agree with what Les said. Is like in today's age, I think a lot of people are looking for the new fancy drill, and we're losing a lot of perspective on why we do these drills. Why are we like, why am I going to sit here and do 300 yards of speed dribble low when the guy can maximally sprint and I can work on his top speed mechanics with him sprinting? Okay, so and the one thing I see in the college setting is that everyone's very methodical in their approach, and they want like, all right, step A, step B, step C, step D, and we're losing the fact that we can get to a much higher training return on investment with getting to the specificity of the actual activity faster versus saying, okay, I got to do speed dribble low for 2 weeks, and then I got to do pogo house for 3 weeks, and then I got to do this and this and this. I do think there is merit behind drills, again, warming these guys up through the specific ranges of motion and getting the specific fire patterns you're looking for prior to executing that skill, like Tony said, right? Sprinting is a skill. Tony, I'm gonna say you stole that from our first presentation, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Appreciate that. But it's definitely useful in our setting, right? Because especially for me, like I train football players. Football players get hurt. There's restraints that are naturally put on kids. I got to train 320-pound guys. I have, old linemen. Like I can't expose them to top speed running consistently. I just can't, right? They're just bodies who can't tolerate that. So a drill will allow me to get a similar exposure to that, get the same firing pattern, get the same return on investment from training without putting them in a precarious situation or putting them at that top speed that they might not necessarily be able to handle consistently on a consistent basis. But they're extremely important. They're extremely important. But I think, again, to bring it full circle, like we have to understand in the context of sprinting, everything is a drill, okay, that is not sprinting.
Yeah, I love it. And again, to the real quick, just as a note to the audience, start dropping your questions for our panelists here in the Q&A, and we'll dive into them and try to get as many answered as possible. So if you've got questions on this topic, please start dropping them in so that we can start tackling them. But one common theme that I heard all of you express is like having intentionality behind what drills we're running and why we're running them, right? So understanding what they are, defining what they are, and understanding where the time and place is and what they're good for. But I also heard all of you express implied in that there's this trap that you can fall into, right? Of like what's sexy on Instagram, like just, doing the drill without the intentionality behind it. And so what would be your advice to a coach to not kind of fall into that trap? Or I guess, why do you think coaches are falling into that? Is it just because they see other coaches doing that thing, and then they think that if they're doing that, they're going to get their athletes the same results, even if the intentionality is not there? Like, why do you think that's happening? What do you think needs to change about the space so that that's not happening?
Mama Hoppy, I think a lot of it has to do with them not understanding what they're seeing. It goes back to truly understanding the principles of speed. Like, Les does a great job in all his presentations of breaking down the properties that increase speed. Okay. And I think a lot of people don't understand them. So they implement drills for drill's sake, just to say they're doing them to check a box, but they don't understand the understanding of the why. Why are we doing this? Why is this implemented in my program? What effect is this going to compound and have on this athlete? Okay, I think it's just kind of like check a box. Like, I feel good about it because it's in, versus really breaking down, okay, like my skill guys, if I'm seeing a common theme, like Tony referenced frontside mechanics, every athlete I get, unless you know this with your combine training when they come back from season, is backside dominant because majority of their positions are stuck in acceleration, that acceleration pace for majority of their playing time. And you're talking about months of being stuck there. Okay, so again, I think if you don't know what the proper frontside mechanics are supposed to look like, or you don't know how to fix that, you might put the wrong drill in there. You might just say, I'm just going to do this for drill's sake. Okay, we're going to do A skips for this, or we're going to do boom booms like Tony, like we love boom booms and Tony showed in his X Factor. So again, you have to understand and be able to diagnose your own athletes and really have a good understanding of what proper mechanics are before you turn around and put a drill in.
Yeah. I think also half the time coaches are trying to justify their position. So if you get brought in at university of whatever, and you're the speed coach and they give you X amount of time, that's your time to shine. That's your time to talk. That's your time to be loud and to do all the show part of it. And I feel like college football has used that in a couple of ways. Like college football has used it as recruiting. They've used it as like culture building. Like there's been a lot of things around drilling that have become like cultural in our space. And then, you basically, if you were to ask every coach that trains speed and said, does the guy that does the drills perfectly, is he the fastest?
No.
It's very rare. So like how, then you just come down to what Joey's saying is like, why? So how much of it, and it really just comes down to time. So how much time are you spending? So if you have 30 minutes, do you spend 20 minutes drilling, 10 minutes running? Or do you run more? Like that's what it comes down to. But it starts with justifying positions and then zooming out into value and then zooming out into how much time do we spend doing it.
Yeah. I mean, this is point. I don't mean to cut you off, Tony, but like speaking on my space, like if I were to go out there and do a 30-minute session and walk off the field, my head coach would have a heart attack. He'd be like, what did they do? Like, what are we doing? So at times to justify the use of and a lot of what college coaches are doing, to speak to what Les really hit on was, like you need filler space. Like that warm up needs to be 20 minutes, right? if I'm going to go out here and I'm going to have pre-planned 150 yards worth of actual speed work, which is going to take all of 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes tops, like I have to have some of that filler in, right? I have to have that eye candy. I have to have the feel and flow of this workout feel a certain way. That's why I love stations, because I can mask recovery and I can mask a lot of things by having rotations in these stations. That's why we split our guys skill mid big and we have them rotate through, because it looks like there's a lot of stuff going on, and in reality there's fucking nothing. It's bullshit. Like they're hanging out. You know, like there's if you like one guy goes over there, one guy goes over here, one guy goes over here, and you wait, you know, another 5 minutes, and then we get another rep. But to the untrained eye, they're like, oh man, look at this kid go. They're racing over here. They're doing this plyometric or whatever it is. So, you know, that there is a certain necessity for survival at times to fulfill how this session looks and how it feels. And like he said, the cultural piece as well. Like, and Tony, you talked about this till you're blue in the face, and I'll pass off to you. Coaches want to feel things like they're hard. They have to feel like there's a toughness element, there's a hardness, there's a military style discipline, attention to detail to it. All right. So and you gotta give them that, right? That's the space we're in.
Yeah, my mind, when Les and Joey were talking, they're really dealing with somewhat different athletes than I am. You know, as a high school coach, we are going to start speed training a week from Monday, and I will have probably equal numbers of 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16, 17, 8. I mean, like I'm dealing with kids that maybe have never been to a track meet. They run in their life, but I'd say most people who run don't actually sprint. I know college athletes that have never sprinted in their life, which to me means you're running as fast as you possibly can. You're getting timed. So when we walk into a speed day a week from Monday, you have to be warmed up before you sprint. But yet we don't call it a warm up. We call them speed drills. And the other thing that really distinguishes my speed drills with many other coaches who I see doing this is that players are like talking back and forth. The athletes are not focused on what they do. I mean, Joey would have a heart attack if he walked in the weight room and somebody was benching and talking at the same time. You do not get stronger unless your total focus is on what you are doing. So I am teaching and coaching and demanding focus during that time. I love what Zach DeCant says. Our warm-up is our training, and our training is our warm-up. That I don't distinguish. I don't call it a warm-up. We do not take a warm-up lap. So I think that I have to have time as a speed coach to get my kids ready to sprint. And by the way, if you have not sprinted before you sprint, then you're not warmed up. Your first time sprint will be part of your warm up. So our 10th speed drill is always an acceleration to top speed. So we have to get that done. And our CNS has to be lit up in order to sprint well. Obviously, if you have not gone through intense things, then the intensity of sprinting will hurt you. And that is, I take that personally. So we don't do that. And man, with high school kids, I just see my job as creating habits, that we want to hardwire good habits. No difference. I go back to a shooter. If a kid's not shooting the ball correctly, he will never be a great basketball player. So if you can get him when he's 13, 14, 15 years old, you might be able to get his shot straightened out, but you can't just straighten it out. You have to repeat it over and over and over again. And that kid has to buy in and focus. So that's what we're doing in a speed day.
Yep, 100%. Okay, cool, gentlemen. There's a bunch of questions pouring into the chat here. So I'll guide here and we'll kind of tackle some of these. But the first question that jumped to the chat, and I love this because I actually love when there's a little bit of controversy on these calls. I think it's good to get the brain going and get people outside of their comfort zone. But Joey, I think this one's for you. A question came in that said, explain why 300-pound linemen should not max sprint. Did I misunderstand this? So I mean, I think that's directly in line with something that you touched on.
Well, you talk about, all right, the average skill guy weighs around 180 pounds, right? They experience 4 times body weight on their foot and their lower limb during sprinting. Okay, you have a 300-pound lineman who's going to experience 4 times body weight. That would be like that's like equivalent to a 180-pound kid trying to squat 500 pounds 3 times a week, if that makes sense. So there's so much stress And that's something that you have to take into consideration when you're planning this training is, okay, all right, I don't need this kid getting stress reactions in his foot. I don't need fifth problems. Like this, these are common injuries in linemen nowadays. Because of the way that the cleats are made. So you have a major issue with cleat manufacturers, something that we have Adidas and we work with Adidas on. But then B is, okay, specificity. And I know this is where Tony's going to get pissed off at me. The fastest recorded speed for my lineman right now, currently in a practice, is 14.7 miles an hour. Not saying that he wouldn't benefit from the training adaptations of maximal speed training. Okay. But for me to do it safely, I don't need to do a ton of exposures for that kid, right? So if this kid, his max speed is 17 miles an hour, he could achieve that in 15 yards. Why do I need to do a fly 10 with him? Right? Because again, space is time and time is space with those big guys, right? So I don't need to build them out and have them do a maximal, a 40-yard run or a 50-yard run. Okay, from the specificity standpoint. And then also I'm achieving what I want with them hitting that speed in that distance. So to me, again, like it's a risk reward. You're balancing it out. Okay, if I consistently expose these kids, and I've done it before, like, so I've made them, this is like practical experience. I've made some mistakes in my training where I've overexposed my bigger guys, and I've seen, okay, kid had a stress reaction in his foot. I had a kid have early symptoms of a fifth fracture. I've had all those things happen before. And then the other side of it too is that how do you balance out? I'm not just training them to be sprinters. I have to balance out the fact that linemen need to be strong, which means that there's going to be high training volumes in the weight room. Okay, they're in the business of kidnapping people. Like, they have to move gigantic humans against their will. The only way to do that is to increase maximal strength and power, rate of force development. Okay, so am I going to sacrifice getting them stronger for getting them faster? Because I can't do it at the same time, right? There's only one bucket of stress that these guys can handle. Okay, so that's where, again, if I'm wasting majority, I don't want to use wasting, if I'm spending majority of my time and energy into getting them faster without hitting these other necessary aspects of training that are going to make them better at the specific position they play, okay, it's like the point of diminishing returns. Yeah, I could get him from 17 to 18, but it's a lot more beneficial for me to get that guy to clean from 320 to 345, or maybe give him more skill-specific work as well.
Got it. Thanks for the clarification there, Joey. Tony, last, anything you guys want to add to that? If not, we'll hit the next question.
Well, and I think this is important. It's okay for really smart, successful people to disagree. I totally understand what Joey just said, totally. But my mind kept going back to the idea that no matter how big and strong you are as an offensive tackle at the NFL Combine, the fastest guys are always the first ones picked. If you run a 5.5 as a great offensive tackle, you will never even get drafted. And I've studied this, and the reason why speed is so important to these guys who never hit those speeds in a game, the faster guys are, the less they tire in the fourth quarter. Slow people get tired faster than fast people. The other thing is longevity. They have taken the slow offensive tackles that have entered the league and found that they don't last as long. Their career may be 6 years, whereas a guy that can really move, that's very athletic, has a longer career. So I could have a healthy debate with Joey without stepping on his toes, I think, and we could just disagree with some things.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And that's why I say sometimes I like when there's a little bit of that on these calls, because we want the different perspectives, right? We want to bring in different contexts to the conversation. So awesome stuff there. Okay, cool. The next question that we've got in the chat, Les, let's start this one with you, which is there a specific way? How do you start your speed sessions for your youth athletes? Do you have a go-to in terms of how you're kicking off those sessions?
With the warm-up.
With the warm-up. Okay. Do you want to go?
I'm just joking. I'm joking.
Like,
I'll go deeper. Yeah. So obviously the warm-up, and Joey kind of alluded to it. Like, there's a general part to the warm-up and there's a specific part to the warm-up. The general part is the general part. You can make it a little specific, but typically in most of our settings, like, there is a more general period that's whatever you want to do, like ground mobility, activation, walk, dynamic stretching, whatever it is. That's not too complex. The specific part needs to match the demand of the day. So if it's an acceleration day, there might be some specific things that are incorporated, components of acceleration that we put in this specific part of that. That's typically what I do. But it all comes down to like, what am I trying to influence? What am I trying to work on? Which part of the run? Is it early acceleration? So the beginning part, like kind of the starting to first 4 steps. Is it late acceleration? So is it the transition from the start to max velocity, or is it max velocity? Then within that, like which pattern am I really trying to influence? Am I trying to influence hip extension? Am I trying to influence hip flexion, or how they hit the ground? There's pieces to it. So in my drill selection, I'm usually thinking of it through that lens. So if I'm doing early acceleration work and it's horizontal, it's about projection, and it's about these shapes that involve extension, then that's probably going to be what I do in the specific part of the warm up. So I'm probably going to work on the range first, then start to work on some of the force producing capacities, and then I'm going to actually execute the skill. Now, if it was max velocity, where it's more upright postures, my drill work might have more upright shapes. So I might have dribbling, or I might have overhead stuff, things like that are going to influence or teach the athletes the positions that I want. Tony's alluded to it like 3 or 4 times, but you don't coach when they sprint. So when they're running, you're not yelling at them, get your knees higher, do whatever. And that's how we were taught, but that's not, we've learned from motor learning that doesn't really influence the outcome that we want. So the pieces that really we're talking about is like, what is our specific prep? What do those drills look like? I'm thinking in terms of time, I want it to be as specific as possible to 1 to maybe 2 pieces that I'm trying to influence for the period that I'm about to go into.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not always the same. It's not one way. It depends on what you're working on, what you're focused on that day.
Yeah.
Yep. Big picture. Okay, cool. Good stuff there. Next question we've got here is from Tyler. And I'll let whichever one of you wants to chime in on this one, or all 3, which is, what are better ways to explain the coach and dribble series where the athlete feels like they're actually doing something? Tony, you want to start there? You chuckled.
No, I'll let Joey take that.
Oh,
right.
Come on, man. You know you want it.
I'll take it.
I really don't dribble much, guys.
I would say don't do it. No,
really?
Okay. No. Do it if you're doing it. It just depends on how long you have that athlete. So like, interestingly, I don't have my NFL combine group dribble because I only have 8 weeks and I only have so much time. So if I have 8 weeks and I have 2 sessions a week, well, I have 3 sessions. So let's say there's 24 sessions, best case. And like, you're not training more than, like, the actual work isn't more than an hour. So that's 24 hours. Teaching dribbling takes some time to make it effective in what you're trying to influence. Like, because you have to get through like the foot ground interaction stuff, how to use the hip, how to move forward, how to make it fast, by the time I do that, I'm halfway through the training group, like the training block. Like, I don't have time to get an adaptation from it. So I'll kind of cut it out of there. But I will introduce it when I have youth athletes and I have a long time and I'm teaching patterns. And I think of it like there's 2 things that are happening. So you're working on where you're contacting the ground under the hip, and then you're working on the horizontal component. And a lot of people don't think of it as being a horizontal drill. I do. You should move fast and you should move forward when doing dribbles, ultimately, like not at first. So you have to teach them how to strike the ground. Then you do have to teach an extension pattern. And a lot of people don't think about it like that. They think of it as a hip flexion drill, and they think about how do they flex the hip from the ground. So from toe off to peak flexion, how do they get to that phase? But it's not that. It's really just about 2 things. It's how hard you hit the ground and how much displacement you create. So you hit the ground, you have an extension pattern. So I think if you're dribbling, and that's just my, like, I probably have tons of people that disagree, but I look at it as a ground drill, not an air drill. And I see a lot of people doing dribbles almost in place and getting this like really nice cycle, but they don't know how to make that actually go forward. And that's the whole goal of sprinting, is to go forward fast. So if you're not doing that, or it takes too much time, then cut it. It doesn't. The guys that I have that run fast can't dribble, most of them. And if I try to teach them dribbling, I'm just going to take time away from the thing that matters. The kids that I have, I do spend time on, whether they're fast or slow, because I can spend 2, 3, 4 years. I have kids I've worked with for 12 years now, and they dribble. So probably a depressing answer, but yeah.
I think like one of the common things that I've heard come up among the three of you, like for every question that we've hit on here, is like a follow-up question. If there's any question about drills, the follow-up question from you is basically like, well, what are your constraints, right? Given the space constraints, given the time constraints, given the constraints of other people looking on and wanting to see what they want to see, whether that's parents or other coaches, right? And if doing that drill is not going to accomplish the purpose of the drill, given the constraints, then it doesn't make sense to do it, right? And so I think that that's a good frame for this next question, which is, I thought a good question from John, which is, I'm limited on space in our training facility, so performance training business. They go outside when there's nice weather, but where they're at 6 months of the year, it's cold and snowy on the ground. And so his question is, would you recommend intensifying drills or doing more drills if we can't hit true max velocity indoors? And I think almost maybe even a reframe of that question would be, is there a way to help an athlete improve their max velocity if you don't have the space to have them actually getting to max velocity?
He needs to look up Gerard Mock.
Gerard.
Yeah, mock drills. Like the guy, he's a Polish speed coach that had. I mean, they can't run outside in the middle of winter in Poland, and he just have them do super intense A skips, B skips, C. All those things derive from him. Now, there's no substitute for maximal sprinting. There isn't, but at the same time, I know like Tony gets it done up in his part of the world because there is restrictions with space because they can't go outside up there as well in the wintertime. That's where I think X factors come in, like X factor drills come in. And, for us, it's pogo variations. And again, like, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, if we're trying to build up elasticity, there's a lot of things you can do to increase that elasticity without a ton of space. And there's some things, if you're trying to build frequency, there's a lot of things you can do to build frequency without a lot of space. Okay, if you're trying to hit specific shapes and positions, there's a lot of things you can do in limited space to hit those shapes and positions. So to me, yeah, like it's not ideal. Like I would love from, and the other thing is this too: go find a hallway. Like that's kind of, to me, that question is making a little bit of excuse why you can't find somewhere. I mean, it's not ideal. Like, but yeah, you got a small facility. Like, is there a basketball court around indoors? Is there? I mean, you need 30 to 40 yards tops. Find someone.
Hey, Dylan, I was going to say too that my mind went to basketball again. Basketball in high school is an 84-foot court. You cannot sprint. You cannot get to top speed in 84 feet. But all the basketball players who come to me are in pretty damn good sprint shape. And you think, what have they done that has improved their sprinting or kept them fast? And it's stop and start and jumping and bouncing. And I've seen kids do a steady diet of plyometrics throughout the winter and do very little sprinting who got faster. So that's not an experiment I would ever do with a track team where I take half the guys and sprint them, the other half and just do plyos. But it would be very interesting. And I think you'd be surprised with that plyo group who never sprinted, how fast they would be.
Yeah, good stuff. Les, anything to kick in there?
Yeah, it just comes down to what makes you fast. So if you can produce a large amount of force in a short time frame, that's one part. If you can create a big range, that's one part. So you could break it into component parts and say, what are the pieces that allow me to run extremely fast? You can work on those in isolation. So it can be like, I would almost say it's an opportunity to really like work on qualities that you probably won't work on if you're outside in sunny Florida every day. Like there's pieces of that equation that you could really get good at without actually sprinting. as you know, every single day. So, but yeah, ultimately you do need to find a hallway or just go outside and run in the cold if you need to once or twice. But there's parts of that equation you can work on all the time, all the time.
Yep, makes sense. Okay, perfect. There's a couple good questions here I want to dive into. I thought this was a good one. So the question was 10 minutes left in practice. This is from a high school football coach, by the way. 10 minutes left in practice for conditioning, quote unquote. Do you think that there's more return on investment to spend that time on speed drills? Example, pogo, sled, skitter, hop, skips, etc.
If you got 10 minutes at the end of practice, take 10 minutes in the beginning of practice and do it.
Same
And
here. Yep.
absolutely no on conditioning. If you have to condition after practice, then your practice wasn't very good.
I couldn't not agree more with Joey on that. And the thing that I preach constantly is you will never get faster in a state of fatigue. If you are mentally and physically depressed, you will never get faster because your CNS is just not receptive to the types of improvement that you're trying to create. So what you do is you take something like my very short atomic speed workout, the shortest speed workout you could possibly do, and you plug that in at the start of practice. You get into football specific stuff as soon as possible. And if you have 10 minutes left in practice and you've accomplished everything you wanted, send the guys home.
Yeah. And I would just add, like, a lot of times you're given that time and there's no compromise. So they might say, hey, we want to do conditioning. So like what can you do? I guess my question would be like, what do you typically do for conditioning? And then how do you make that less conditioning based? Like, how do like, if I've been in that situation before where it's just like I gotta find something else to do. So yeah, skipping, I don't know. I would just buy time with drills or something like that, something hard, but not, plotting conditioning.
Got it. Cool. All right, sweet guys. So we've got probably 10 to 15 minutes here left to be able to answer questions. And there's 31 questions left in the chat. So if I don't get to your question specifically from the audience, know that I'm trying to pick out ones that I feel like are all going to take us down similar paths of discussion here. So I thought that this one, which is just getting a little bit more granular and specific, like we talked about maybe not doing a dribble, right? Like we talked about some stuff that you might not do given certain constraints. So this question is, what do you consider a good set of drill progressions to improve front side mechanics on a weekly basis for a high school athlete? What drills would you consider most necessary for that purpose?
In my speed drills, we do 10 things. 6 of the 10 are front side things. 3 of them are plyometrics. And that last one, as I said earlier, is an acceleration into a full speed sprint. And then I yell spike up and we time 3 sprints. But those 6 front side things are things that you see all the time. We do something called super high knees. We're really just trying to get, big range of motion, big in the front, short in the back. We do snappy skips. I say snappy because I don't want to pull the leg through. I want to snap it through. And then we do booms. We do the prime times, which is not high knee, but it's still front side. We do short prime times, high frequency. We do big prime times, and then we do bent knee prime times. So all those things are front side. And I guess even one of the plyometric things we do, we do bounding. Bounding is all front side. So in a way, 8 of our 10 things are really focused on front side.
Got it. Anything you'd add there, Joey, Les?
I mean, I would just say, like, for us, we add in, especially like in a maximum velocity session, we'll hit the wickets for some context, and those aren't sometimes they're not maximal. They could be sub-maximal as well, and you could distance them out based off that, and that's a good way to get front side. Drum drill is another one that I like, and it can be controlled too with the intensity of it, where you have a build up like a fly 10, and then you try to increase the frequency in that front side in that 10-yard distance. So again, adding constraint, and then obviously coasting out. There's a few of those, but for the most part, like Tony said, I mean, we're hitting the same things. We're doing boom booms, we're doing prime times, we're doing pogo hops, we're again preparing the tissue for that high intensity. We're trying to get front side. There's no magic pill. The best thing to do is just again focused sprints is going to be the best way to get front side. Is just give them a little context and then have them go.
Yep, got it. Okay, there is a good question here from Jimmy, and Jimmy asks, where do you guys recommend a coach new to coaching speed start in order to become proficient at coaching speed? Books, certifications, internships, what should be the primary focus of a new coach? And I'll put a caveat here, which is like we always give our panelists time to mention anything that they have at the end. So I would say outside of products or courses that the three of you have produced, besides your stuff, where else would you go?
And TFC, man, come on.
Yeah, you can call out. You guys call out each other's. Yeah, it'll be good.
No, I gotta plug Tony. I mean, Tony, what was it, 2020 when you called me and got me up on that stage for the first time? I owe this man so much. So if you're not going to TFC and you're not learning, and then if you're not subscribing to the subscription you guys have and listen to Les, who has like 1 million videos out there, all right, like I don't know what you're doing. Plus, listen, YouTube's your best friend. All right, we live in a educational world. Like if you want to find something out, go on YouTube or just Google something. Google sprint coaches in college, and I guarantee, like if you look up Bruce Schexnayder, you can find 15 podcasts right now that will change how you train kids, right now. Okay, so to me, it's go Google it, get on YouTube. I know Les and Tony and myself, we put so much stuff out on Twitter and Instagram as well. Like it's insane. Like I got, your algorithm changes when you go look at stuff. I went on a speed algorithm binge the other day, and it was insane how much stuff comes up on Instagram alone. Like I spent like an hour and a half watching stuff. So, I mean, there's so many resources nowadays. But TFC, come on, man.
TFC really is a great place to start, because I think the great thing about TFC is that we are about 98% high school coaches. So even like the experts we bring in, like Les and Joey, they are trying to talk in a connective way to high school coaches. And I think that many of the clinics that I went to as a young coach were college coaches that tried to show us all why they were up on stage and we were not. And so they would be very complicated and sophisticated. And so I think that if you can get around a high school level clinic, that's really good. I really think there's not enough people visiting other people. It's one thing to watch me do a presentation at a clinic. It's totally different to come and watch me coach. I think that my best days of learning were things like visiting a Chris Corfist track practice at 7 a.m, where I had to drive an hour to get there. I was a changed man after watching him coach for an hour. And he is so much better at coaching than he is at presenting, like we all are, that it's just really important to be exposed to people who do things well.
Add on that, the last thing I would say, everything they both just said, and I'm speaking at TFC, which is always probably like one of my favorites to do, just because Tony is geared it towards developing coaches and coaches that work with youth athletes, which is significantly harder than working with pro athletes. Significantly harder. Working with pro athletes is so easy. Combine, so easy. And not like there's complexity to it, but you're making small adjustments. But yeah, I would say that the last thing, if I'm just starting out, is to coach as many people as possible, as often as possible, and take video and try to figure out what makes the fast guys fast and the slow guys slow. And once you start to come to the same conclusions that all of us have come to, so what makes people fast, what makes people slow, and you'll start to see commonalities across every coach you talk to that works with athletes. And that's how you really learn, is like, it's confirming what you're seeing, it's confirming some of your biases, it's teaching you, but it's reps. And a lot of times what I see is that, especially this generation of up and coming coaches, like in their 20s, early 20s, they want to learn everything and be the smartest. And then they want to start coaching, and they want to start coaching at the top level. I think you need to start with kids and unathletic kids, and that'll teach you more than anything. The coordination piece of it, what to say, what not to say, how much to talk, when to listen. Right now I see everybody just trying to be an expert, which is really hard, really hard. So yeah, I'd start there.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's all great advice. Okay, I think we probably have time for one more here. And this is a question that I feel like comes up in some way, shape, or form on pretty much every webinar we do, but I like hearing the different takes and answers to it, because I think that this is just a consistent barrier in the space. So the question is, have you ever had a situation when the coach absolutely did not agree with the training methodology that you're implementing? And how did you reach a resolution to protect your training ideology? So basically just, how are you working with other coaches that might not agree with your approach or your ideology around speed? And have you been successful in being able to bring them over to your side and shift their mindset a little bit? And Joey, maybe we'll kick off there with you.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind when I'm trying to persuade a coach, I have to teach them the why and the understanding of what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish. And then after that, I have to provide results that confirm that what we're doing is working and changing their athletes, right? So I'll give you the example. When I was at Northwestern State, I had the opportunity to train the basketball team. They never did train it. They never trained at all beforehand. The coach was an old school, like, we're just going to shoot free throws and get good at basketball. And I was like, that's fine. And they had an assistant coach who said, all right, we're going to test them in 3 weeks, and I want to see results. So I said, okay, we'll test vertical jump. He was dead set testing bench, and we tested a 10-yard sprint. All right, we did very generic training because these kids have never trained before. They're all different backgrounds. It's basically like introduction to training. Our mean average increase on vertical jump was like 2 inches. Okay, average bench press went up like 20-some pounds. And I'm not saying this because I'm a guru. This is just because they've never trained and they started training. All right, and this guy was all of a sudden, I'm an expert. I'm a savant. Like, this guy's like worshiping the ground I walk on. Okay, so I say all that to say this, that results speak for themselves. So when you can provide results and you could show them there's actual physical evidence that these athletic qualities are changing, okay, that speaks volumes. The other side of it is this. My biggest advocate to help change a coach's mindset is the players. So when a player who we're testing consistently sees consistent progress, okay, the buy-in from that player goes way up. The discussions in the locker room become, yeah, man, I feel bigger, man, I'm faster. Man, you see what I jumped 3 inches higher, and their coaches hear that. And that's the easiest way to persuade a coach, is to have your players talk about the gains and the increases in athletic performance that they're experiencing.
I was going to say, I am really lucky that I have been free of, like, I am the head coach, and nobody gives a rat's ass about the track program at Plainfield North. So basically I get to coach in my own world. But I get this question all the time, and I consult with a lot of coaches, and Joey hit it the nail right on the head. It's all about data. That if you can measure things that matter, I say measure meaningful things so that meaningful things become more meaningful. If you can measure the things that matter and show improvement, that is the definition of motivation. Motivation comes from seeing progress. And then to get buy-in is the exact same thing. And I believe that so much of traditional preparation for sports was simply hard work. And hard work is not performance level work. Matter of fact, it's the opposite, because you're always tired. If you're fatigued, you are not at performance level. All you're doing is effort, effort, effort. And that's why coaches love effort, 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 because they're always too tired to perform. So if you are sprinting and jumping and measuring those things and lifting and measuring those things and record, rank, and publish, which I believe is the food of cats, record, rank, and publish. When you do those things, it would take an idiot as a head coach not to buy in. There are idiots out there, but that is your best chance of convincing somebody that your methodology is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Go ahead, Les.
Last thing, man, I hate going last because you guys say everything. But you really need to understand that like every coach is trying to win, and it's really flipped. I think the question is flipped. Like, what can you extract out of that coach from their philosophy in terms of how they want to win? Then how do you connect what you do to those philosophies and speaking their language? And like a lot of times our field is really big on jargon and saying like really big words and what they mean. But if you go and talk to the coach, they might say different words. Like they might call your speed agility, or they might call your thing fast twitch, but they're saying the same thing. It's just understanding what their philosophy is, and using data to connect to that philosophy. Like, okay, you want to play a spread offense and you want guys to be flying around. It would make sense to make those guys that are flying around a little bit faster. And this is how I do it. I think we get way too complex and we want the coach to buy into the complexity rather than just the outcome and simplicity. Will make athletes perform better and will make them healthier. That's all speed does. And it goes back to what I said in the beginning is like, why do you want to make someone faster? You want to make them faster for performance side, but also the health side. It's 50-50. Faster players are typically healthier if they're running correctly. And you can't look at it in isolation. Just, I want to make people fast. You want to make them fast for what? To play this sport better, to win more games. Like it always has to connect back to that. Head coaches, they get fired all the time for not winning games. They never get fired for not having fast athletes. So you have to consider that and understand you're just a component part of that bigger mission of winning. So
yeah, that's huge. Fast for what? I like that. Okay, cool, gentlemen. I want to leave a few minutes here for Tony and Joey, you guys to be able to, plug our community here into any resources that you have or anything that you might have coming up. So Tony, I'll kick it to you. Anything you want to tell our audience here about?
Yeah, Track Football Consortium, Chicago area, December 6th and 7th. Go to Twitter at TF Consortium. Simply Faster is our sponsor. They sell the tickets, so you can buy tickets from there as well. There are typically coaches from 20 to 25 different states that come in. When people walk into our consortium, it's not like a normal clinic. They feel like they all of a sudden belong to something. A group of very sharing coaches, people like Les and Joey and Brian Kula and Chris Corfus and Cal Dietz and all these just amazing people that would give you the shirt off their back. So it's a really cool thing, and it's really become diversified in the not just track and football, but really a performance-based clinic that is, yes, you can learn how to hurdle, but the important thing is that you can learn from track coaches how to get your football team faster or your volleyball team faster. So all that's good. And the other thing is, like Joey said, my YouTube has 5 million views. And if you check one thing, if you're not aware of any of my stuff, type in the Atomic Speed Workout, a 2-minute video that would give you really good ideas on how you would start addressing speed with your own son or with a small group or your track team or your football team or whatever.
Love it. And by the way, to the audience, we'll send all this stuff out after too. I think we're going to drop some stuff in the chat here, but if you don't catch it, we'll send it out in the follow-up email. Joey, anything that you want to tell people about?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that, like Tony says, we've been in the data collection business for a while, and the company we work with now, DataViz, has been phenomenal and it's really been a game changer with consolidating all of our data into easy reports. They do a fantastic job, and they did a really good job of taking care of us here at FAU and making these reports not only digestible for us, but also for our coaches. They're very easy to digest, and get those specific sessions quantified easily to the coach. So it's been really cool working with them, and they're really willing to hear ideas, and they want to hear from practitioners because we've been back and forth with them on creating different reports and all those things. So DataViz has been a major contribution to this program here. So I want to make sure I shout them out.
I don't have anything to plug because obviously this is a USR thing, but I do want to finish with like probably the most important thing, and what we talked about, like with drills, getting people faster. There's really only 4 ways that we could do it, and I should have said this earlier, but number one is do nothing, and I've seen a lot of people be very successful not doing anything. There's some track coaches in the world that train some of the best people in the world that do absolutely nothing. They give them workouts and they say absolutely nothing. Tony, you know what I'm talking about, like nothing. Another one is to give everyone the same model, every single person the same model. I've seen people be successful there. It's a little bit harder. Your model has to be really good, but I've seen it happen. Third would be to individualize everything and everyone. I have not seen that work too well. It's hard just from a time coach perspective. Like it's hard to have a family and do that and try to individualize everybody. And then the last part is to mailbox athletes and to group them into bigger groups of what they might need based around who they have. So if you have a lineman, a receiver, a linebacker. So I meant to say that earlier, but I think that's one thing that as a coach getting into the industry or a coach that's working with athletes, you could do nothing and generally just give them some training, athletes will get better. You just have to be careful about every other intervention that you give after that. And your voice is an intervention, your voice is a change. And if you do too much or try to get too complex, it's going to actually do the opposite of what you're trying to do. And I know the point of this was to talk drills. Hopefully we've talked you out of trying to go too deep into this one category and start looking at all these other pieces that surround it as well. Like Tony does a great job with environment, making sure that the environment is they're running fast, they're outside, they get sun. Joey does a really, really good job of creating a culture around speed. Like I would say those 2 things I just mentioned are probably more important than the small pieces that they do from a drill perspective. So yeah, I just wanted to put that in there at the end.
Awesome. Thanks, Les. And I will say, I'm more shameless than Les. So we actually do have something to plug. Obviously, this webinar is sponsored by the Universal Speed Rating. So we appreciate our panelists for coming and sharing the time with us. Joey, Tony, Les, thank you guys for coming and dropping some knowledge. We do have the Speed Lab partnership through the USR. So if you are a performance training business who wants to level up what you're doing for speed training through analytics, education, tapping into our community, more of these types of conversations, we'll drop a link and there'll be stuff in the follow-up to be able to check that out. But we appreciate you guys coming and hopefully you learned something.